For 3 years, I worked the overnight security shift at Blackwood Museum. Most nights were painfully quiet, just empty halls, ancient artifacts, and hundreds of security cameras watching every corner. During orientation, my supervisor gave me one rule that everyone else laughed about. If camera 27 goes offline at exactly 2:17 a.m., don't go to Gallery 9 until the feed comes back. I thought it was just another old security superstition, until the night I looked at the monitor and realized camera 27 wasn't broken. It was looking straight into an empty room where I was standing. I spent the next morning trying to convince myself I'd imagined what I'd seen on the monitor. By the time my shift ended, daylight was pouring through the museum's massive front windows. School groups were already lining up outside while parents bought tickets beneath banners advertising the museum's newest Egyptian exhibit. Everything looked perfectly normal. It always did during the day. Blackwood Museum was one of the largest museums in the state. 4 floors, more than 200 security cameras, galleries filled with everything from dinosaur skeletons and ancient pottery to medieval armor and priceless paintings. During visiting hours, it felt alive. At night, it felt abandoned. The museum echoed in ways buildings weren't supposed to. Footsteps carried farther than they should. Air vents whispered through empty galleries. Every old statue seemed to be watching you as you walked your patrol. Most new guards hated working overnights. I preferred them. Or at least, I used to. When I returned that evening, Frank was already in the security office sipping stale coffee from the same chipped mug he used every night. Frank had worked museum security for almost 25 years. Gray hair, weathered face, the kind of man who never seemed surprised by anything. "You look tired," he said without looking away from the camera wall. "Didn't sleep much." "You'll get used to nights." I almost told him about camera 27. Instead, I shrugged and signed the shift log. Frank gave me the same assignments as always. Hourly patrols, door checks, motion sensor reports, nothing unusual. Then, almost as an afterthought, he slid a ring of brass keys across the desk. "You'll be covering Gallery 9 tonight." I looked up. "The Egyptian exhibit?" He nodded. "Routine maintenance. Just make sure nobody's in there after close." Something about the way he said it bothered me. It sounded rehearsed, as if he'd deliberately avoided mentioning the cameras. Around 9 o'clock, the last visitors left. The museum changed almost instantly. The chatter disappeared. The lights dimmed to overnight mode. Security gates rolled down over the entrances with a deep metallic rumble that echoed through every hallway. One by one, the galleries emptied until I was the only person walking among thousands of years of history. I started my patrol on the first floor, the dinosaur hall, everything exactly where it belonged. Second floor, European art, nothing unusual. Third floor, ancient civilizations. The Egyptian gallery sat at the far end beneath a stone archway marked Gallery 9. Inside, rows of glass cases displayed jewelry, scrolls, ceremonial masks, and dozens of black stone statues collected from excavations around the world. I swept my flashlight across the room more out of habit than necessity. Every case was locked. Every motion sensor glowed green. Nothing moved. As I turned to leave, something caught my attention. Mounted high in the corner above the entrance, camera 27. Its tiny red status light blinked steadily, watching the room, watching me. For reasons I couldn't explain, I stood there longer than I should have. Then I glanced at my watch. 2:14 a.m. 3 minutes. Without realizing it, I'd started counting down. I reached the security office at 2:23. Frank barely looked up from this coffee. "Everything good?" I hesitated. "Yeah." The lie came out easier than I expected. If I told him I'd spent the last 3 minutes staring at camera 27 instead of finishing my patrol, he'd probably chalk it up to a rookie mistake. I wasn't ready to admit something stranger, that I'd been waiting for the camera to do something impossible. The rest of the shift passed quietly, or at least it looked quiet. Every time I glanced at the monitor wall, my eyes drifted back to camera 27. Its feed looked perfectly normal. Gallery 9, glass cases, stone statues, nothing out of place. By sunrise, I'd almost convinced myself the previous night had been stress. Almost. The next evening, I got to work an hour early. Frank was walking the first floor patrol, leaving the security office empty. I sat at the computer used to review maintenance records. Out of curiosity more than anything else, I searched camera 27. The system returned dozens of reports, then hundreds. I frowned. Most cameras went years without needing replacement. Camera 27, 1989, replaced. 1996, replaced. 2005, replaced. 2017, replaced. 2025, replaced. Every report ended almost the same way. Intermittent signal failure. No hardware defect located. One technician had added an unusually frustrated note. 5th replacement. Problem follows camera regardless of wiring. Recommend relocating exhibit instead. Request denied. Relocating the exhibit? Not the camera, the exhibit. That didn't make any sense. I opened the museum's archived floor plans. The newest blueprint labeled the room Gallery 9. An older blueprint called it Gallery 11. Another simply marked it East Antiquities Wing. Then I opened a renovation plan from 1978. The room wasn't there at all. The hallway continued straight through. No gallery, no walls, nothing. A voice behind me nearly made me jump. Looking for something? I spun around. Emily stood in the doorway holding a stack of research folders. She was one of the museum's senior curators, usually buried in restoration work long after visitors had gone home. Just trying to understand why one room keeps changing names. She glanced at the screen. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked uncomfortable. Old renovations, she said. That's all? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked over and quietly closed the blueprint window. You'll save yourself a lot of headaches if you stop digging into Gallery 9. So you've heard the stories. I've worked here 12 years. She offered a tired smile. I've heard all of them. I expected her to laugh. Instead, she leaned closer. People think the Egyptian exhibit was donated by a private collector. It wasn't? She slowly shook her head. No. Then where did it come from? Emily looked toward the empty hallway outside the office before answering. It arrived. Before I could ask what that meant, Frank's radio crackled. Emily? She keyed hers immediately. Go ahead. We've got a delivery at the loading dock. She stepped toward the door, then paused. Without turning around, she said quietly, when camera 27 goes offline tonight, don't assume it's the camera that stopped seeing. Then she walked away. I stared after her. For the first time since taking the job, I wasn't curious anymore. I was genuinely afraid of what 217 was about to show me. At 2:10 the following morning, I was already sitting in the security office. Every patrol was finished. Every exterior door had been checked twice. For the first time since I'd started working at Blackwood Museum, I was waiting. The wall of monitors glowed softly in the darkness. 23 cameras showed empty hallways. 4 watched stairwells. Another dozen covered entrances and loading docks. Camera 27 showed Gallery 9. Nothing moved. Frank glanced over from his desk. You planning to stare at that screen all night? I forced a laugh. Just killing time. He shook his head and went back to his crossword puzzle. The digital clock beneath the monitors changed. 2:16 a.m. I felt my pulse quicken. The feed from camera 27 flickered. Once, twice, then black. No static, no distortion, just a perfectly black screen. Frank didn't even look up. 2 minutes, he muttered. What? It always comes back. He said it so casually it sent a chill down my spine. I grabbed my flashlight. I'm going to check it. Frank's pencil stopped moving. For several seconds he didn't speak. Then, without raising his eyes, he quietly said, I wouldn't. I was already opening the office door. The hallway beyond was silent. My footsteps echoed through the museum as I hurried toward Gallery 9. The emergency lights cast long shadows across the polished floors. Every exhibit I passed looked exactly as it had an hour earlier. Nothing had changed. Or so I thought. When I reached the Egyptian wing, the corridor felt wrong. The air was colder, the silence heavier. I stopped beneath the sign reading Gallery 9. The doors stood open. Inside, every display case was illuminated. Every artifact appeared untouched. I swept my flashlight across the room. Stone statues, golden masks, ancient scrolls, exactly where they belonged. Nothing moved. I glanced toward the ceiling. Camera 27 stared back at me. Its tiny red light was dark, dead. Then, it blinked. Once. The camera had come back online. Relieved, I turned and walked back toward the security office. Frank looked up the moment I stepped inside. Told you. The camera's working again. He nodded. See? Nothing to worry about. I wasn't convinced. Something about the room had felt different. I sat down in front of the monitor wall. Camera 27 was live again. Gallery 9 looked exactly as I'd left it. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Frank was staring at the screen. So, he said quietly, when did you go into the gallery? I frowned. What are you talking about? I just got back. He slowly pointed at the monitor. I followed his finger. The recording had automatically rewound to the moment the signal returned. There, standing in the center of Gallery 9, was me, facing directly toward camera 27. My flashlight hung loosely at my side. I wasn't moving, not blinking, not breathing. The timestamp read 2:17:01. The footage continued. 5 seconds, 10, 12. I remained perfectly still. Then, without warning, I suddenly walked toward the exit exactly as I remembered, except I never remembered walking into the room. I scrubbed backward through the recording frame by frame. My blood ran cold. The gallery doors never opened. No one entered. One frame, the room was empty. The next, I was already standing in the center, as though I'd appeared there. Frank leaned back slowly. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked genuinely frightened. Barely above a whisper, he said, "It started remembering you." Neither of us spoke. The footage remained frozen on the monitor. Me, standing in the center of Gallery 9, perfectly still. Frank reached over and stopped the playback. His hands were shaking. It was the first crack I'd ever seen in the man. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said. What did I see? Instead of answering, he locked the office door. Every bolt, every latch. Then he pulled a thick gray binder from a filing cabinet. The cover read, East Wing Excavation, 1978. "I've lied to every new guard," he admitted. "The orientation, the rule, it wasn't a joke." He opened the binder. The first photographs showed construction crews excavating beneath the museum during the East Wing expansion. The deeper they dug, the older the stone became. Then they broke into a chamber, The next photograph made my stomach tighten. Hundreds of black stone statues, life-sized, each with a different face. They stood in a perfect circle around a single pedestal. Frank tapped the image. There were 216. He turned another page. Every statue had been removed, except one. It stood on the pedestal alone. Unlike the others, it had no face. Its head was completely smooth. No one could move it, Frank said. They tried cranes, hydraulic jacks, even cutting it apart. Nothing worked. So they built Gallery 9 around it. The room suddenly felt colder. Frank pointed toward camera 27. That camera has never recorded the statue. I frowned. What do you mean? It records the room. The walls, the display cases, the visitors. But whenever anyone compares the footage to photographs, one exhibit is always missing. The statue. Emily's warning echoed in my head. Don't assume it's the camera that stopped seeing. So why does the feed go black every night? Frank opened the last section of the binder. Incident reports, security guards, curators, maintenance workers. Every report ended with the same sentence. Subject observed standing inside Gallery 9 during signal interruption. Subject has no memory of entering. I looked back at him. Has this happened before? He didn't answer. Instead, he slid one final photograph across the desk. A black and white construction photo from 1978. Workers stood around the excavation. Then I noticed someone in the background. A museum security guard, modern uniform, modern flashlight, modern shoulder patch. Me. I wasn't helping. I was simply standing there, watching. Frank's voice dropped to a whisper. It doesn't take people. It remembers them. Before I could speak, every monitor in the security office flickered, one by one, until every screen showed the same live feed. Gallery 9. For the first time, the faceless black statue was visible, and it was no longer standing on the pedestal. Neither of us moved. Every monitor showed the same live feed. Gallery 9. The faceless statue was gone. The pedestal stood empty. Then one of the cameras flickered. A shadow crossed the room. Another followed. Figures, standing between the display cases. Not visitors, not employees. Stone statues. The same ones from the excavation photographs, except they weren't stone anymore. Their faces looked real. Men, women, children, all staring toward the empty pedestal. Frank grabbed the radio. Controlled all overnight staff. Only static answered. He tried again. Nothing. Every radio in the office erupted with the same burst of white noise. Then, silence. The office lights dimmed. The monitors went black one by one, until only camera 27 remained. The feed slowly brightened. The pedestal was no longer empty. The faceless statue had returned. But it wasn't standing where it had been before. It was several feet closer to the camera. Frank didn't hesitate. We're leaving. He threw the office door open. We hurried into the hallway. The museum was completely dark. Emergency lights painted long red reflections across the marble floor. No alarms, no voices, only our footsteps echoing through the building. As we passed the European gallery, I glanced toward one of the glass display cases. A reflection looked back at me. Not mine. The faceless statue was standing behind us. I spun around. The hallway was empty. Frank grabbed my arm. Don't stop. We ran, past dinosaur skeletons, past medieval armor, past the grand staircase. The front lobby came into view. Moonlight poured through the towering windows. Freedom. Frank reached the entrance first, then stopped so suddenly I nearly collided with him. The front doors were gone. Not locked, gone. In their place stood a smooth stone wall. Neither of us spoke. Behind us, footsteps. Slow, measured. Not ours. Frank whispered without turning around. "Whatever happens, don't look." The footsteps stopped. I felt something standing only a few feet behind me. Cold air brushed the back of my neck. Against every instinct, I looked. Nothing. The hallway was empty again. The front doors had returned. We stumbled outside into the freezing night air. By sunrise, the museum looked exactly as it always had. Police searched every gallery. Nothing was missing. According to the security recordings, neither Frank nor I ever left the office. The cameras showed us sitting at our desks until morning. They never showed Gallery 9. They never showed the blackout. They never showed us running. I quit that afternoon. Frank retired the same day. A week later, a package arrived at my apartment with no return address. Inside was a museum brochure. It advertised Blackwood's permanent collection. I flipped through it absent-mindedly until I reached the final page. A full-color photograph of Gallery 9. The faceless statue stood on its pedestal. Around it were dozens of exhibits. One of them wasn't listed in the guide. It stood near the back of the room. A life-sized museum security guard, modern uniform, flashlight on his belt, standing perfectly still, watching the visitors. The caption beneath it read, "Donated to the museum 2026. If you enjoyed tonight's story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next trip into the unknown. And tell me in the comments, if you were working the overnight shift, would you have ignored the rule or gone to Gallery 9 anyway? I read as many of your comments as I can, and your ideas often inspire future stories. Until next time, keep the lights on. Double-check the security cameras. And if you're ever walking through a museum after closing, don't trust every exhibit you can see. Some of them were never meant to be observed. Sleep well.